Devastating news has broken, informing the world of a new strain of influenza that's slowly wiping out humanity, and doctors can't do anything to contain it. This could be the end of civilization. So in response, the World Health Organization begins the construction of 500,000 underground bunkers. But who gets to occupy them is up to a lottery, meaning only the winners get to survive. 6 years later, the lucky winners still survive in these self-sustaining underground bunkers. There's one person per bunker, and their only means of communication is by a computer that allows them to video chat in groups of up to 7 people. For sustenance, they live off nutrient-packed shakes, and they keep their circadian rhythms running normally thanks to an artificial day and night cycle. A rowing machine serves as exercise equipment and a way to provide kinetic energy to the bunker. On this day, an argument breaks out between a group of 7 refugees who have kept each other company for the last few years. Orlando has made the shocking confession that he was a serial killer before the pandemic. Understandably, the others are repulsed and admit that he's never quite fit in. Orlando doesn't feel shame, he just sneers and makes fun of them. He starts taunting Atlanta, callously reminding her that her children are probably dead by now. This is totally below the belt, so the group leader Boston proposes to vote to kick Orlando out of the group. It's not a decision to take lightly because once you kick someone out, you can't add them back later, but Orlando appears unbothered. Boston, Atlanta and Chicago vote in favor, but Phoenix refuses to participate in the forced isolation of another. Her boyfriend Denver backs her up, and Houston point blank refuses to be the last vote. Fed up with this charade, Orlando demands to be cut off from the feed, continuing to jeer about the group's inevitable dark future. Denver finally folds to peer pressure and cuts Orlando off later that night. Later, Phoenix can't sleep, but then Denver reaches out to her on private chat. Phoenix admits she doesn't feel comfortable judging others for their mistakes. However, Denver assures her that Orlando will be just fine in his Florida bunker, he just can't talk to them. The pair return to bed after saying "I love you" and touching hands through the screen. So cheesy. 8 months later, Phoenix continues to have trouble sleeping as she keeps dreaming about her mum, and Houston's sleep cycle is messed up because his artificial lighting system is malfunctioning. This morning, everyone is in a bad mood, so naturally a few arguments erupt, but Atlanta pays them no mind in favor of praying, and Phoenix decides to join in. Then the group goes over the daily stats. After checking on their own vitals, they study the bunker numbers and realize that from the original 500,000, there are now less than 490,000, losing around 6 per day. Chicago thinks keeping track of these numbers is totally pointless. As another argument ensues, he breaks it up by playing the instructional video that came with the bunkers. The instructor teaching them how to utilize their bunker is Nadine, the original designer. Still today, nobody is paying attention to her because they've already seen this video at least 1,000 times. That night, Phoenix and Denver appear on each other's bedside screens and test calling each other by their real names instead of their location before saying goodnight. The following day, everyone's stat screens start freaking out before they completely shut down. Houston's sleep cycle program is still glitching, and Phoenix wonders if they broke something when they booted out Orlando. The others won't agree to bring him back, and Denver doesn't think he can even do that anyway, which upsets Phoenix as he won't even try and gives her friends the cold shoulder for now. Worried about her, Denver privately calls her and assures her that he only wants to help, so Phoenix finally opens up and tells him her story. Her mother died a long time before the pandemic, and Phoenix happened to be in prison when she won the lottery. She'd never met her dad because he died when she was young, so her mother raised her alone, which meant Phoenix didn't see her much because she had to work a lot to support them. As a lonely teenager, Phoenix started hanging around with the wrong crowd and got into illegal substances, which meant she started doing a lot of lying and stealing. At 17, she ran away, returning after an OD, but she never quit her habit. One night, she was under the influence and started paranoidly thinking her mother had stolen her stash, so she grabbed a knife from the kitchen and killed her, only to later find her stash in her room where she'd left it. Now Denver understands why Phoenix has been unhappy about banning Orlando from the group, even though he still doesn't believe their crimes are on the same level. To cheer her up, he decides to start working on trying to lift the ban. It takes him many hours, but later that night he succeeds in his mission. But when they switch on Orlando's feed, his bunker is empty. The pair tell the others about what's happened, but Boston's outraged that Denver and Phoenix went behind their backs. Houston starts to freak out, thinking Orlando may be the culprit for his lighting system messing up. But Phoenix thinks perhaps Orlando just tried to escape. Atlanta points out that the doors are locked, but the truth is that they have never even tried to open the doors since they arrived. Phoenix thinks of trying to open her own door, but the others warn her that it wouldn't be a smart move because the virus could get inside. Sometime later, Phoenix and Boston have a private conversation about the whole ordeal. Phoenix thinks it's about time there was a change of group leadership. Still, Boston accuses her of sounding more like Denver every day, who he thinks is a lowlife. Denver reminds Boston of Boston's dad, the kind of guy that looks friendly on the outside, but only to hide the fact that he becomes a monster when riled. Phoenix thinks he's exaggerating as she believes she knows Denver well enough to know that he is a good person. Even so, she's feeling a bit rattled by the end of the conversation. For comfort, she replays a few old videos of her and Denver having a good time together. Rewatching these videos makes Phoenix wonder if Orlando had some recordings of his own, so she asks Denver to try and gain access to Orlando's system. Denver does as asked, and the first few vlogs he finds are pretty standard, just Orlando going about his daily routine. However, the last one is quite chilling. Orlando is working out, but suddenly the screen is filled with static before Orlando can be heard yelling, "Leave me alone!" When the static clears and his bunker comes back into view, the place is empty and the door is open. The video is 5 hours long, so Denver fast-forwards to the end only to see the door close. When they tell the others about this, a paranoid Houston begins rambling about Orlando being a mastermind that sent them to the bunkers while lying about the pandemic. Boston considers the possibility of the video being fake, which doesn't make much sense. So while everyone argues, Phoenix suggests that they should try to escape because clearly the bunkers are no longer safe. As always, Boston wants to put it to a vote, but as Houston isn't in his right mind, Atlanta says that this is not the time to make any decisions. Later that night, Phoenix begins closely examining every corner of her bunker and finds a small panel on the wall that she tries to remove. But her efforts are suddenly interrupted by the computer showing that Houston is slamming his head against the wall repeatedly before laughing maniacally as he spreads the blood around with his hand. As he's finally losing his mind right then and there, someone enters his bunker right before the screen is filled with static. A few seconds later, the static clears only to show another empty bunker. Phoenix runs to the door to see if there's anyone outside but finds nothing, and Boston is forced to admit that they aren't safe anymore. After sharing her concerns with Denver, Phoenix tries to fall asleep, but then hears someone enter her bunker. Thankfully, it was just a dream, but when she wakes up, she finds a rat chilling on her bed. Apparently, the little guy got in through a loosened panel she'd been fiddling with the day before, so Phoenix decides to check it out. The panel is labelled emergency vent, but when she puts her hand through the gap, she finds nothing. The others check their walls and find the same panel with the same empty space behind it, which doesn't make any sense because they're supposed to be underground. And so ensues yet another argument. Phoenix makes herself the group leader and tells Denver to see if he can contact other survivors through the computer. At the same time, the rest begin examining their bunkers more closely to see if they can find any possible exit points. Chicago, however, thinks they should just wait it out, so he doesn't join in the search. No one finds any clues, so Atlanta decides to risk it and break the shake powder pipe to see where it leads. But just like what happened with the panel, she finds absolutely nothing behind the hole in the wall, just a vast empty space. At that moment, her screen begins filling with static as someone enters her bunker, and the cycle repeats again. After a few seconds, her screen returns to normal. Of course, Atlanta is gone. Not able to handle any more of this, Chicago removes his blanket to reveal all the shake powder he's been hiding to starve himself. Then he hangs the blanket on a pipe and uses it to end it all, leaving Phoenix, Denver, and Boston as the remaining group survivors. After calming down and gathering their thoughts, Denver shares what he's found while looking around in the system. He's managed to access other people's vlogs outside their group. Although they're videos with no audio, most seem perfectly normal. But there were also those who couldn't take the confinement anymore and also ended their lives. The most shocking news, however, is that Denver could only find 1,000 feeds, not 500,000, which means there are only 1,000 bunkers, and they've been lied to. Phoenix decides she wants to make an escape on her own terms instead panels to cut the door wires, even if this could leave them without food or oxygen. Afterwards, she and Denver agree on a place to meet if they can get out, and Boston puts it to one last vote for the sake of tradition. Now they're ready. The three cut the wires simultaneously, activating an alarm, but thankfully also opening the doors. The stairs outside lead nowhere, and they think they're trapped for a moment until they realize the wall next to the stairs is also a door. Opening it, they find themselves in the same corridor as before because they've been inside the same building the whole time. Of course, Phoenix and Denver kiss for the first time, and the trio starts investigating the rest of the place. They find that each door leads to different bunkers, which have always been right next to one another. Eventually, they find a door that takes them to the building's roof, and guess what they see? An ordinary, everyday city that looks like it has never been through any pandemic whatsoever. There are also two guards blocking the only exit, so Boston distracts them, giving his friends a chance to escape. But Phoenix won't leave until she has answers, so she and Denver enter a different part of the building filled with offices. Finally, they find one that contains a load of paperwork. Phoenix begins rifling through the documents, and Denver finds a board with their group's photos describing them as convicts. Suddenly, Nadine finds them and points a gun at them to keep them under control because she knows Denver is extremely dangerous. Phoenix demands an explanation, and Nadine admits that this is an experiment and they're still in prison. The pandemic had been a lie. The news coverage they saw on TV at the time was with paid actors, and they moved the prisoners from their jails to the bunkers by slipping sedatives into their food. They've been removing people from their bunkers because they're shutting down the experiment due to the leaked video of the group banning Orlando reaching the national news. The public were furious that these prisoners had been treated so nicely and with so much freedom. The government heard their pleas, and the rest of them will soon be sent back to regular prison cells. Denver begins berating Nadine for her lies, and Nadine claps back, calling him her one mistake. The prisoners were chosen according to an evaluation program that flagged them as unlikely to reveal their stories to one another. This allowed Nadine to study how each created new identities to fit into the assigned group. Phoenix demands to know what her friends really are, so Nadine obliges and explains how Orlando was a career criminal in and out of prison all his life and had already confessed to his murders. Houston was in a gang and responsible for 20 murders. Atlanta suffered postpartum depression and drowned her daughters. Chicago was an addict and a street worker. He murdered many of his clients to rob them. Boston robbed a bank with his two brothers and then murdered both to keep all the cash for himself. And finally, Denver stalked and killed 11 women he met on dating websites. Phoenix is disgusted by the truth, but Nadine insists she did a good thing by giving them a better life than prison, with a chance to put their past behind them and create something new. Suddenly, more guards arrive and the pair are tased. Later, Phoenix wakes up in bed in her bunker as a mysterious man approaches her, but then Phoenix wakes up realizing she's dreaming. She and Denver are now handcuffed to a couple of chairs, and the two begin discussing what's going on. Phoenix can't believe she trusted Denver, but he assures her he does love her, the same way he loved the women he killed. Charming. Denver had been suspicious of the experiment ever since Phoenix confessed her crime, as, along with Orlando's confession and his own history, it didn't take him long to put two and two together. He just kept quiet because he was fascinated by the whole thing and enjoyed watching it play out. Phoenix calls him a sociopath, and Denver agrees. After, the guards accompany them back to the corridor where the rest of the group is being held in front of their respective bunkers. Orlando begins calling out their hypocrisy as soon as he sees them, then turns around and elbows a guard in the face to steal his weapon. Unfortunately, this only causes the other guards to shoot in defense, and they kill him. The remaining 5 from the original group are sent back to their bunkers to wait while arrangements are made to return them to their previous prisons. Chicago's body is taken away and all his belongings are tossed in the trash. Phoenix finds just 2 things in her room: the picture of her mother and the body of the dead rat.